I'm 74 years old, and I want to start with something that most people will never admit out loud. I was an angry man. Not violent, not dangerous, not the kind of angry that makes headlines or ends up in police reports. The quieter kind. The kind that lives inside a chest and presents itself as principles, as standards, as not being willing to tolerate certain things. The kind that gets dressed up in reasonable language and called conviction, called strength, called not suffering fools. The kind that the people around you feel constantly and that you barely notice at all. I was that man for most of my adult life, and for most of that time I genuinely believed that my anger was one of the better things about me, that it meant I cared, that it meant I had standards, that the things that made me angry were worth being angry about, and that a man who didn't get angry was a man who didn't stand for anything. I was wrong, in ways that took me decades to fully understand, and in ways that cost me things I cannot get back. But before I go any further, if anything I say in the next few minutes reaches you, if anything lands in a place that feels uncomfortably true, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. These are the conversations I needed someone to have with me at 35, and every share means they reach someone who might still have time to act on them. Now, let me ask you something. Think about the last time you were genuinely angry. Not mildly irritated, properly angry, the kind that had heat in it, that changed the quality of your breathing, that made you say something you wouldn't have said otherwise, or go quiet in a way that made everyone in the room aware of the temperature. Now tell me honestly, what did that anger actually produce? Not what it felt like it was doing. Not the sense of righteous momentum it gave you, not the feeling of being correct and making sure everyone knew it. What did it actually produce in the situation, in the relationship, in the person on the other end of it? And more importantly, what did it cost you? Because I spent 40 years not asking that second question. I was very good at the first one, at building a case for why the anger was justified, why the situation warranted it, why any reasonable person in my position would have felt the same. I was a very good lawyer for my own anger. I never once lost that case in my own head. What I never did was look at the invoice. Here is what I used to believe. I believed anger was information, that when I felt it, it meant something real was wrong, something that genuinely deserved a response. And there is some truth in that. Anger is information. But I made a mistake that took me most of my life to identify. I confused the feeling of anger with the accuracy of anger. I assumed that because I felt it strongly, it must be pointing at something real and proportionate. And that assumption was wrong far more often than I ever admitted. I believed that expressing anger was honesty, that swallowing it was weakness, that the people who stayed calm in difficult situations were either not paying attention or not brave enough to say what needed to be said. I prided myself on saying what needed to be said. I called it directness. I called it integrity. The people around me might have called it something else, but I wasn't listening carefully enough to find out. I believed that my anger protected me, that it kept people from taking advantage, that it set a clear line between what I would and wouldn't accept, that without it I was vulnerable, exposed to the kind of treatment I had decided I would not tolerate. Anger felt like armor. It felt like the thing standing between me and a world that would otherwise walk all over me. What I didn't understand, what I could not see from inside the armor, was what the armor was actually doing to the person wearing it. Does any of that sound familiar? When you are angry, when you feel that specific heat, that righteous certainty, do you ever stop to ask whether it is actually serving you? Or does it just feel too true, too justified, too important to question? The moment I started to understand what my anger was really costing me arrived when I was 61. My son, my eldest, came to me with something he wanted to talk about. A decision he had made about his career, one I disagreed with, strongly. And I responded the way I had always responded when something violated my idea of how things should be done. Not with shouting. I want to be clear about that. It was quieter than that. It was the particular coldness I could produce, the withdrawal of warmth, the clipped responses, the way I made my disapproval physically present in the room without ever raising my voice. I had perfected that. I had spent decades perfecting it without realizing I was doing it. He left that evening, and something in the conversation had closed. Not slammed, closed, quietly. The way a door closes when someone decides not to force it anymore. And over the following months I noticed something. He stopped bringing things to me. Not dramatically. He didn't disappear from my life. But the particular kind of conversation, the one where he brought me something uncertain, something he was working through, something he wasn't sure about, those stopped. He had learned, through years of my responses, that bringing me uncertainty meant encountering my reaction to it. And my reaction to it had never been safe enough to keep coming back to. I had made myself someone he couldn't be uncertain around. That understanding arrived slowly, over weeks of sitting with what had happened and being honest about what I saw. And when I finally saw it clearly, really clearly, without the self-justifying fog that had surrounded it, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, not shame, something quieter and in some ways harder. Grief. For the conversations that hadn't happened because he had learned not to have them with me. For the relationship that had been, without either of us choosing it, quietly shaped by something I had never examined. For the years of small moments, moments where my disapproval or my coldness or my absolute certainty had been the loudest thing in the room, even when I hadn't said a word. And then the pattern became visible to me, not just with him, across everything. I started seeing the cost of my anger, not as individual incidents, but as a cumulative weather system. The people closest to me had spent years navigating it, learning its patterns, adjusting their behavior around its presence. My wife knew which subjects to avoid. My colleagues knew which days were better days to bring problems. My friends had learned, some of them long ago, that a certain kind of honesty with me came with a certain kind of price. They hadn't left, most of them, but they had, in the specific, measurable way that people do this, made themselves smaller around me, curated what they showed me, learned to manage the version of me they encountered, rather than simply being present with me. And I had called that respect. I had called it people taking me seriously. It wasn't. It was people managing me. And I had been too certain of my own justifications to see the difference. What has your anger trained the people around you to do? Let me tell you what anger actually cost me. Not as a concept, in the specific, felt, irreversible reality of a life where I let it run too long without examination. It cost me closeness, real closeness, the kind where another person can bring you the full, unedited version of what they are going through, and trust that what they receive back will not be judgment or heat or the particular weight of your disapproval. That kind of closeness requires safety, and I was not, for most of my life, a safe person to be fully honest with. I had warmth, I had loyalty, I had genuine love for the people in my life. But safety, the specific, daily, consistent quality of being someone people can be uncertain or wrong or vulnerable around, I did not reliably provide that. And closeness cannot fully exist without it. It cost me my son's early years. Not the years themselves, I was there, but a quality of presence inside those years. The conversations we didn't have because he had learned which ones I would receive well and which ones I wouldn't. The version of his inner life I didn't have access to because he had, with the intelligence of a child who pays close attention, figured out what it cost to share it with me. Children always figure that out. They are paying attention long before we realize they are. It cost me my own peace. This is the one that took the longest to see clearly. I believed anger was power, that it was energizing, that the fire of it was a source of fuel. What it actually was, I now understand, was a drain, chronic, invisible, the sustained, low-level physiological cost of a nervous system that was too often in a state of reaction. The cortisol, the tension in the body that I had normalized so thoroughly, I had stopped feeling it as tension and started feeling it as my resting state. My body was paying a bill for my anger that I didn't even know I was running up. It cost me time, years of time spent in the aftermath of anger rather than in the life I could have been living. The recovery periods after difficult exchanges, the hours or days where the atmosphere was heavy and conversation was careful, and everyone, including me, was operating in the shadow of something that had happened. Those periods are not neutral. They cost everyone in them something, and they accumulated over decades into a significant portion of my life. Now, I want to speak to you directly, and I need you to be honest, not managed honest, genuinely honest. Is there anger in your life right now that you are calling something else, calling standards, calling principles, calling not being willing to be disrespected, calling high expectations, calling caring too much? Because I called it all of those things for 40 years, and the names were not entirely wrong. There were genuine values underneath it. But the anger itself, the way it expressed, the way it landed, the way it shaped everything and everyone around it. That was doing damage under every one of those names. Who in your life has made themselves smaller around you? Who has stopped bringing you certain things? Who has learned to manage you rather than simply be with you? Sit with those questions, not defensively, with the specific, uncomfortable honesty of someone who is willing to look at something they have been not quite looking at for a long time. Because the people in your life have been paying the cost of your anger, and most of them have never said so. Because they learned, as people always learn, that saying so came with its own cost. Here is what I know now, at 74. After my son and the closed door, and the years of slowly understanding what I had been building without knowing I was building it. Anger is not strength. I know that sounds simple, but I need you to hear it as more than a phrase, to feel what it actually means in the context of a life. The strongest people I have known, genuinely strong, in the way that holds under real pressure, were not the angriest ones. They were the ones who could sit with difficulty without needing to discharge it onto the nearest available person, who could hear something they disagreed with without immediately converting their disagreement into heat, who could be wronged, genuinely wronged, and choose their response deliberately rather than automatically. That is not passivity. That is not weakness. That is the hardest thing a person can develop. The ability to feel anger completely and then decide, consciously, deliberately, what to do with it. Whether it belongs in this conversation, whether expressing it will serve the situation or simply serve the feeling, whether the person in front of you deserves your full heat, or whether the heat is, in some meaningful sense, about something else entirely. Because most of the anger I have felt across a lifetime, was not really about the thing in front of me. It was about something older, something learned, something I carried into every room without knowing I was carrying it. And the people in the rooms had no way of knowing they were receiving something that wasn't really meant for them. Understanding that, truly understanding it, not intellectually, but in the way you make daily decisions, changed the architecture of my relationships in ways I am still discovering. Now, am I telling you that anger is always wrong? No. There is anger that is precise and appropriate and necessary. There are things in this world that deserve to be met with fury. There are moments when the absence of anger is its own kind of moral failure. What I am telling you is this. Most of the anger most of us carry in daily life, the ambient anger, the low-level heat, the quick reactions and the cold withdrawals, and the certainty that is just a little too absolute, that anger is not serving the things it claims to serve. It is not protecting you. It is not making you stronger. It is not earning you respect. It is costing you closeness. It is costing you peace. It is costing you the specific, irreplaceable quality of being someone that the people you love feel genuinely safe around. And those are not small costs. They are the costs that you feel most clearly at this end of a life. Not the career consequences of anger, though those are real. Not the health consequences, though those are real too. The relationship consequences, the conversations that never happened, the version of your children's inner life you never had access to, the friendships that thinned without rupture, the intimacy that retreated to a safe distance and stayed there. Here is the warning, given to you now while you still have time to do something with it. The people in your life will not always tell you that your anger is costing them something. They will adjust, they will manage, they will find the workarounds, and you will interpret their management as proof that everything is fine, the same way I did for far too long. It is not proof that everything is fine. It is proof that they have stopped expecting fine from you and are making do with what they have. You can change that, not all at once, not through a decision you make once and then consider done, but through the daily, specific, humble practice of pausing before the heat rises and asking, is this serving anyone? Is this the response the situation deserves? Or is this something older, moving through me, looking for somewhere to land? That pause, that single question, I promise you it changes things. I know because I found it late, later than I should have, and it still changed things. Not everything. Some doors had been closed too long, but enough to matter. Enough that the years I have had since that pause became a practice are different in quality from the years before it. You still have more time than I did when I finally understood this. Please use it differently than I did. If this reached something in you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it, with someone who is carrying anger they have not examined, with someone who calls it strength when the people around them might call it something else. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment. Tell me about the anger you have been calling something else. Or tell me about someone in your life whose anger has cost you something. I read every one, and I will be here, with more to say, because at 74, there is quite a lot still left to say.